Every choice has a consequence. On October 2nd, 1995, I took 23 physical steps. That was the distance from the car I was traveling in to what would become my new home. As I took those steps, I thought about my wife. I thought about my two children, Rob and Alex. So they were just little tykes at the time. I thought about my career. Up to that point, I was tax partner in a CPA firm. I had testified before Congress on various aspects of federal tax law, written articles in national magazines, taught continuing professional education courses in 30 states. I was Chuck Gallagher. I was a somebody. I thought about the church where I had been music director for 12 years. I literally thought about everything that defined my life. But on that day, as I took those steps, on the 24th step, I took my hand, pushed open the door, and stepped in to federal prison. On that day, I became 11-6-42-058, an inmate, what most people would define as a nobody, because every choice has a consequence. Hey, where did you come from? Well, let's say I'm about maybe 30 years into your future. Wow, that's crazy. So you mean we made it? Yeah, you can say we made it. Hey, look, if you stay around a little bit, I'll tell you exactly what happened. Amazing. And okay, whoa. And here's something you might need. Keys to the handcuffs. It'll make it a little easier. Okay, thanks. I'll be back in a bit. Now, some of you are asking, why is it that a convicted felon is actually doing a program on ethics and ethical behavior? And my response back is, well, who better than someone that understands how smart people can make dumb choices and, most importantly, how to prevent it. Now, as we move into the program, I want to ask you a series of questions. And since this is presented virtually, I want to be really clear about something. As I ask those questions, I really do need your responses. But we are not going to go into the chat area and type the responses in and so forth, because after all, we're talking about ethics and fraud. And so there may be some responses, questions, or answers that come up that will be, well, let's say a little easier for you if it's not publicly shown. So here's what I want. I want you to notice on the screen, I want you to text me your confidential answers. Now, let me be crystal clear in saying this. I am not going to take the information that you text and put you into some spam folder and send you material. It will be completely erased at the end of this. But what I do know is this, I've done this many times, is if you're texting me your responses, you can be completely, totally honest. And it's anonymous. So, as I ask the questions, you're going to see on the screen the text number. That's 828-244-1400, 828-244-1400. Again, I'm going to show that on the screen. And when it comes time for you to text me your responses, we're going to put a countdown clock so that you'll be able to see you've got some time to think about what your response is. Text them to me. I know you're going to blow up my phone, but that's absolutely okay. But that way we can actually communicate here virtually. So let's start with the very first question. Now here's the question. How many of you would voluntarily choose to make an unethical choice? Question one, how many of you would voluntarily choose to make an unethical choice? Text me your responses at 828-244-1400. Go ahead and begin texting now. Here's the countdown clock. Okay, let's see what kind of responses we got. Now that first question is a little predictable, so let me take a look at this for a second. It's no, 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 yes, that's good, yes, maybe depending upon the circumstances, yes, no, 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 maybe. Okay, that response was kind of cute because this is a virtual program. I'm not going to out anybody, but let me just say that was quite creative. But for the majority of you, as I look down through here, the majority of the answers was, no, I probably would not voluntarily choose to make an unethical choice, although some of you were a little on the fence depending upon what that choice might be. Okay, good. So let's go to question number 2. Now, question number 2 takes a slightly different slant. The question is, how many of you think that voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Text your response to 828-244-1400. But think about this for just a second. Before you start texting, we have just finished a crazy time in history. I mean, literally, nobody has lived through a pandemic, and we are living through that at this point. So think about this with me for just a second. Let's say someone lost their job. Let's say they were having a hard time feeding their family. They go to the grocery store, and realizing they had a limited amount of money, they decided that they were going to shoplift some items. Okay? So they shoplift some items and leave the store. Now, that is clearly voluntarily breaking the law. So there are a multitude of examples, but how many of you think voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Let me get my phone out. It's already starting to vibrate. The number is 828-244-1400, and here's your countdown clock. Okay, well, let's see. How many of you think voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Yes, 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 yes. Depends on the law. Depends on the law. Depends on the law. Yes, yes. Voluntary breaking the law is unethical. Yes, yes. Okay, so again, the majority of you say yes. Okay, here's somebody with a specific response about breaking what law. But yes is the majority of the responses. Okay? All right, great. Now, this next question really is going to be fairly easy. Okay, so let me just say that. Next question, piece of cake. This one should be really quick. And the question is, how many of you have driven on the interstate highways over the past 2 weeks? Not a hard question, yes or no. 828-244-1400. The answers are coming in. Here's your countdown clock. Okay, and your answers are yes, 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 and some of you have expanded on that. There are a few of you that appear to be fairly psychic. because I keep hearing the answer is yes, and you're approaching the next question. So let's go there. This is going to be easy as well. And how many of you have exceeded the speed limit by, let's say 5 to 10? Okay, the number is 828-244-1400. Yes, once again, you have a minute to respond. The answers are coming in. Here's your countdown clock. And of course, the majority of you responded yes. You have, in fact, exceeded the speed limit by 5 to 10. So this one gentleman, well, I say gentleman, I don't know. I can't really tell from telephone numbers, but it just feels that way. In fact, if I was a betting person, I would say this person might have been involved in law enforcement, but the response was, under 9, you're fine, over 9, you're mine. So whoever that is, that was classy. I like that. Most everybody, of course, has exceeded the speed limit by 5 to 10. Now, let's think about the series of questions here for just a second, because it is easy for people to make unethical choices when those choices seem to be socially acceptable. Now, go back for just a second. How many of you would make an unethical choice? Most people said no. Few maybes, but mostly it was no. How many of you think voluntarily breaking the law is unethical? Well, yes. The answer was overwhelmingly yes. But when it comes to something simple like, have you driven on the interstate highways in the past 2 weeks? And if so, have you exceeded the speed limit? You said yes. You see, exceeding the speed limit is something that is socially acceptable. And it is easy to make unethical choices when they are socially acceptable. Let me share with you an example. I'm a vice president in a public company. My responsibility is sales and marketing. My counterpart, Brian, is operations. And so we're carrying on a conversation. It wasn't long ago. Now, this preceded pandemic. I'm going to say it was 2018, 19-ish. But his daughter was approaching the age of 15 and a half. She had gone through driver's education. She was now at the place where she was going to ride with a parent or so, at least getting ready for the driving test required in our state. So she's driving with Brian. Now listen, let me just say this. If you've ever had a 14, 15-year-old or so approaching 16 and you're driving with them, it's a little unnerving, okay? I'm just going to say that practically, because you don't have brakes on your side when they're driving the car, but she was a careful driver. And so anyway, here in South Carolina, where we live, there's an 8-lane highway, 4 on one side, 4 on the other side. And so Brian decided it was appropriate for her, because he knew this was going to take place in the driving test, for her to merge onto traffic onto the interstate. Now, this particular stretch of highway, the interstate speed limit is 60. Nobody goes 60. Nobody goes 60. I mean, the prevailing rate is 80 or slow if there's been an accident. But in any event, here she is. She's starting to merge onto the highway, and she merges on at 60, and all of the cars around her are just whizzing by, some of them blowing their horns, some of them throwing various fingers at her, and her daddy said, "Look, Kelsey, you're going to have to pick up the speed a little bit, baby." And her response back to him was, but Dad, I'm doing the speed limit. And Brian said, when he came back to work, he said, Chuck, I remember the presentations you've done. And he said, it just hit me at that point in time. He said, I was trying to teach her how to drive practically with traffic, to be safe with traffic. He said, that's socially acceptable here. He said, but if she got into the car with the highway patrol check rider and she merged onto the interstate and accelerated up to 70, 75, or 80 like all of the other cars, he would fail her. So sometimes we have to think about the question of what is socially acceptable. Now, let me ask this question. What causes an otherwise honest person to do dishonest things? Hey, let me take it from here. I'll tell the story. I'll step away. You see, it was 1987. I'll never forget this. January of 1987, and I get a call from my local banker, David. He was a city exec in CNB. And I was expecting when the call came through that perhaps he was going to send yet another client. He was really good like that. You see, we went to the same church together. We were in the same Sunday school class together. I appreciated the fact that he sent us business and he liked the work that we did. So when they said he was on the line, I took the call with anticipation. But he said, Chuck, is there a problem? It looks like you're 2 months behind in your house payment. Okay, the truth was, I was 2 months behind in my house payment. What I did not want to admit to David or to anybody else was that my wife and I were overextended and underfunded. You see, our oldest son had been born November 30, 1986, and so of course we had the nursery done and we had the first Christmas, and so it was an explosive time financially. The best way to put it is I was robbing Peter to pay Paul. I just couldn't keep up with the bills. So when David said, Chuck, are you 2 months behind in your house payment? It was that lizard brain moment. I went from rational thought to fight or flight. And the first thing I did instinctively is I said, David, are you sure? Are you sure that payment hasn't been misapplied? Now, David's response was, well, Chuck, I don't think so, but let me check and I'll get back with you after lunch. Whew. Get back with me after lunch. Now, the truth was, I didn't want to admit to him that I was behind in my house payment because the first thing that went through my mind was, oh my gosh, if I admit that I'm behind in my house payment, then what happens? Well, he would probably think, well, why am I sending him business? I mean, if I'm sending him business and he's behind in his house payment and he can't manage his own financial affairs, how can he help other people manage their financial affairs? After all, that's what he's supposed to be doing. So consequently, this doesn't make any sense. Maybe I should send it to somebody else. And of course, if he sent the business to other people, then what happens? I make less money. And if I make less money and I can't pay my bills now, I certainly won't be able to pay my bills. My goodness, I could not admit that to David. That's lizard brain, by the way. Now, let's talk about this. What I want to do is I want us to look at the decision cycle. You see, the first part of this decision cycle is need. It was crystal clear when I got the call from David that I had a need. Now, in my head, the need was I needed to, one, catch those house payments up really quickly, and number two, in my mind, lizard brain, I had the need to make sure that he didn't know that I was not able to manage my own financial affairs. Everything starts with need. Now, as human beings, when we have a need, the second part of that cycle is we look for the opportunity. Here's the need. What's the opportunity that surrounds me that perhaps will help me solve the need? So I thought to myself, he said he'd get back with me after lunch. This was early in the morning, well, 9:30, 10 o'clock-ish, banker's hours. And I thought to myself, well, what I could do is I could reach out to my partners. I am sure, since we got big bonuses at the end of tax season, at the end of April, I'm sure that they would be happy to advance the paltry $2,000 that I needed now. However, the two partners that actually signed the checks both were out on an audit. They were in the far reaches of western North Carolina. This was on a Friday, and they would not be back until about 7 o'clock that evening. So as a result of that, they wouldn't be able to sign the checks in time for me to be able to pay the bank and maintain the illusion that sure enough, I was able to manage my own financial affairs. Need, opportunity. Where's the opportunity? Oh, I know. I could call my mother. My sweet mother lived in Maryland. I was in North Carolina at the time. Now, I could have called and said, hey, Mom, I need to borrow $2,000. And she likely would have said, well, first, what for? I know, Mom. But of course, she would have been happy to make that happen. But let's think about this. It was 1987. We didn't have the ability to instantly transfer money, to go online on our mobile devices and transfer funds or whatever. So the ability to get the money quickly wasn't going to happen. Wow. I have got to come up with something. Oh, I know. You see, I was trustee of a client's trust. In those days, it was what was referred to as a Clifford Trust. It was an educational trust for children. And in order to be able to have such a trust that was tax-free during that time, you had to have an independent trustee. So one of the clients that trusted me had named me as trustee of their children's trust. That's an opportunity. So what did I do? I looked at myself and I said, I need $2,000. Now I know this is a little bit weird, but then I looked back at myself and I said, well, now this is highly unusual. It's not normal that you would actually get money from the trust. Well, of course, I looked back at myself. Notice, I'm carrying on a conversation with myself. I looked back at myself and I said, how much interest are you earning on this trust? To which the response was 6% per annum. Aha, here's what I will do. At the end of tax season, some 4 months from now, I'll pay you 10% if you will loan me $2,000 today. Well, this is highly unusual. You know we're going to have a note. Now, notice what just happened. I literally had a conversation with myself. That is the truth of what happened. Because I could steal the money from the trust, but I didn't want to see myself as a thief. Of course not. So in the decision cycle, if I have a need and can find opportunity, in order to be able to make it work, I have to be able to rationalize the behavior. So I sat down at the computer. In those days, it was WordStar or WordPerfect. That was before Microsoft Word and Excel. And I sat down at the word processor and said, I, Charles Gallagher, being of sound mind and body, do hereby, and I drafted a note and stole the money. Of course, I called it what? Borrowing. Of course. I intended to pay it back. But I took the funds. And sure enough, that afternoon, David calls back and he said, Chuck, he said, I've checked the records, and before he could finish his comments, I said, David, I am so embarrassed. I said, I did not make that payment. I said, you know, my wife and I, we just had our first child. Again, of course, he knew that because we were in the Sunday school class together. And I said, I'm sorry to admit this, but I said, and she pays the bills. Now, truth be known, she didn't pay the bills. I did. But if I'm going to create a ruse, let's play it out. I said, you know, in her postpartum time, she thought I was taking care of it. I thought she was taking care of it. It slipped through the crack. David, this is so embarrassing as tax partner of the CPA firm. I can't believe this. I'm going to be up there in 30 minutes and I'll bring you the stolen money. I didn't say stolen. I'll bring you the money. And sure enough, I stole money and made the house payment. Crisis averted, at least in my mind. But let's play back here with the decision cycle. Need, opportunity, rationalization. But there's a fourth component, and that's validation. In other words, if I had a need, I found an opportunity, I could rationalize the behavior, can I validate that what I did was okay? Can I validate that what I did was okay? Now, I'm going to pose a question to you, okay? This is one of those text the answer questions. I'm curious to see what you think. Did I pay it back? Remember, I promised at the end of tax season when I got my bonus, I would pay it back with 10% interest. So here's the number. Text yes or no to 828-244-1400. 828-244-1400. There is going to be a quick 1-minute countdown clock for you to be able to answer that question. And we will be right back. Okay, thanks for participating. I appreciate it. Interestingly enough, most of you said no. There are some brave souls that said yes. I look at the numbers and it appeared as I was looking at them before we got right back here that it's running about 60-40 no. But the answer to that question was yes. I validated it by paying it back. But in the decision cycle, what did that mean? That meant I could repeat it. Does that make sense? It means I can repeat it. So, having convinced myself that what I did was really borrow money, what happened? I did it again. And over time, I paid it back. Need, opportunity, rationalization, validation, repeat.